Many men remain alone, not because no one loves them, but because they never dare to be truly seen. A man after 35 wakes up in silence, not because there is no one next to him, but because he no longer wants to call anyone. His loneliness is not about the absence of a woman. It's about the fatigue of being needed, where what they want from him is not himself, but a role. He has built a life, learned to be reliable, calm, outwardly composed, but inside there is emptiness. Not pain, not despair. A scorched field. Everything that used to drive him forward, ambition, love, the desire to be the best, seems to have burnt down. Only the habit of existing remains. And every evening, looking at his phone screen, he realizes that even if someone were to text him now, he wouldn't feel like answering. He isn't looking. Not because he can't, but because he sees no point. He is tired of the endless explanations of who he is, what he feels, why he is silent. Tired of proving that there is depth in him, but it is not put on display. He is tired of superficial connections where interest lasts only as long as the man is emotionally convenient. Of women who talk about intimacy, but are afraid of true vulnerability. Of relationships where every word is measured and feelings turn into transactions. He is tired of being a project for correction. A man is lonely, not because there is no one, but because they have stopped seeing him as a living being. A woman wants him to be attentive, but not weak, sensitive, but not dependent, strong, but gentle, reliable, but interesting, ideal, yet alive. And every time he tries to fit this list, he loses a part of himself. First, he stops getting angry. Then he stops arguing. Then he stops feeling. And one day, only the mask that is comfortable to wear remains. He says the right things, does what is necessary, smiles when he should. But inside, silence. This silence is not peace. It is the fatigue of the impossibility of being himself. A man who stops searching is not always disappointed. He has simply exhausted his attempts to explain. He realized that in the modern world, a man is not listened to. He is analyzed. His feelings are called toxic masculinity. His pain, infantilism. His loneliness, closed off. But no one asks why he closed off. Because no one is interested in hearing a truth where the blame is not only on men. Male loneliness has become a form of silence in which he can at least breathe. When he doesn't have to be strong for someone, he can feel weak for a minute. When he doesn't have to be correct, he can be honest for once. When he doesn't have to act, he can just be silent. This silence scares women. They see his detachment as coldness, his calm as indifference, his restraint as alienation. But behind this is not coldness, but burnout. A man who has spent years trying to be who they want him to be, one day stops wanting to. He is not angry. He doesn't blame. He is just tired. Tired of the need to prove he is worthy of love. Tired of expectations that are impossible to meet. Tired of being blamed for everything. For silence, for directness, for emotions, for their absence, for the desire to be alone. And the more he tries to be understood, the more he loses himself. Because in this world, a man is asked to be emotional, but there is no place for his emotions. His vulnerability causes anxiety, his honesty, resistance, his pain, irritation. And then he chooses silence. From the outside, it seems easy for men to be alone, but that's a lie. Their loneliness is not about comfort, but about survival. They have learned to exist without warmth, like soldiers returning from a war where they can't show their wounds. They don't talk about feelings because they know they won't be understood anyway. They don't cry because a man's tears evoke not sympathy in women, but fear. They don't ask for love because they have too often heard that real men don't need it. And every time he holds back what is alive, another spark goes out inside. A man is not afraid of love. He is afraid of losing himself in it. Afraid of turning back into a project for correction, an object of expectations, a tool for someone else's emotional security. He is tired of being a pillar for those who cannot hold themselves up. He is tired of being blamed for other people's dramas. He is tired of his calm being called indifference, and his silence, coldness. And when he stays alone, it is not a defeat, but a way to preserve the remnants of himself. But somewhere deeper, there is something that prevents him from fully shutting down. Because inside, the boy who once wanted to be needed still lives, who believed that love is a place where you are accepted, not redesigned, who sought a woman not for power, but for silence. But this boy has been hidden away for a long time. The world told him that feeling is shameful. Women told him that emotions are weakness, and now he wears armor inside, which is emptiness. Men remain lonely because they are tired of being blamed for everything, for feeling too little, and for feeling too much, for being silent, and for speaking, for being strong, and for being vulnerable. And when society demands the impossible from them, to be simultaneously a pillar and a mirror, a rock and a cushion, a protector and a listener, they choose loneliness, because in loneliness, they can at least stop acting. But the reason is not only in them. A man is not born detached. He is made that way. First, the mother who loved but would not let go. Then the women who wanted love but sought control. Then the world that punishes weakness and condemns strength. And somewhere between these forces, the man loses the ability to be. He becomes convenient, predictable, safe, and a safe man ceases to be alive. What women call male aloofness is often nothing more than a reaction to female control. A man stops opening up when he sees that his every emotion turns into material for analysis, when every word is used against him, when every vulnerability causes the woman anxiety, not tenderness. Then he falls silent, and the more they try to open him up, the deeper he withdraws inside. He is not looking for someone to blame. He just sees that everything he was taught doesn't work. He was taught to be strong, but strength makes him lonely. Taught to care, but care is perceived as weakness. Taught not to complain, and now no one hears his pain. Taught to be a knight, but now women want not knights, but mirrors that reflect their significance. He realized, no matter who he is, he still won't meet the expectations. Therefore, he stops trying. But beneath this silence there is life. Beneath the fatigue, desire. Beneath the loneliness, the capacity for deep connection. The man simply does not believe that there is a woman who can handle his truth, who will not be scared of his strength and will not shame his weakness, who will not compare, correct, or evaluate, who can look into him without trying to remake him. And until he meets such a woman, he will remain alone. Not because he cannot love, but because he does not want to lose himself again. But the reason for this is not in the coldness of men, it is deeper. It begins where women have stopped being women and men, men. Where, instead of attraction, competition appeared. Where tenderness became weakness and honesty a risk. And until this balance is restored, loneliness will be the only form of protection. But this is only the beginning. Next, about how we arrived at this, and why women, without realizing it, have made men emotionally lonely. The woman of the modern world is tired of being a woman, but she doesn't know how to be anyone else. She was taught to compete, control, and achieve. Since childhood she heard, "Don't be weak, rely only on yourself. Men cannot be trusted." She was forced to choose strength as a way of survival. And when such a woman meets a man, she does not see an equal in him. She sees a potential threat to her independence. Her intimacy is built not on trust, but on testing. She wants love, but starts the relationship with defense. She waits for the man to prove that he is not like all the others. And in this expectation, she herself destroys what she is looking for. A modern man doesn't leave relationships because he is incapable of love. He leaves because he is tired of being under judgment. A woman no longer seeks strength in a man. She tests it. She doesn't accept, she evaluates. She doesn't open up, she controls. His every step passes through the filter of her anxiety. Every word is enough for an internal interrogation to begin. She wants to feel safe, but instead of trust, she chooses power. And the more power, the less love. This is how the dynamic is born, in which the man falls silent and the woman speaks louder. She demands emotions, but cannot handle the truth. She says, "Be real," but gets scared when he stops acting. She demands attention, but loses interest when she doesn't feel control. And the more he tries, the more she feels the emptiness. Because deep down, a woman doesn't want the ideal. She wants the alive. But the alive scares her. After many such relationships, the man stops believing. He sees that women want mature men, but cannot handle maturity. Maturity is silence, responsibility, clarity. But the modern woman, accustomed to drama, does not recognize love in this. It seems to her that if there is no turbulence, there is no passion, and she herself initiates chaos to feel alive. The man, on the other hand, sees this as a threat to his peace and retreats. Thus both run away from each other, all the while blaming the opposite side. But this is not personal fault. It is the consequence of a deep historical trauma. Women lived in dependence on men for centuries, and now their consciousness is taking revenge. On an unconscious level, the fear of submission lives, so every attempt by a man to show strength is perceived as violence. A woman wants to feel protected, but cannot trust someone she unconsciously sees as an oppressor. The man, faced with this duality, loses his footing. He doesn't understand how to be. Any initiative from him is perceived as pressure, any distance as indifference. He cannot be himself without risking being accused. All this leads to an invisible war. The woman defends herself. The man closes off. She raises her voice. He withdraws into silence. She demands explanations. He falls silent even more. She feels cold. He, fatigue. And the harder she tries to regain the emotional connection, the further he goes. Because where there is constant control, there is no intimacy. The most paradoxical thing is that both sides suffer. The woman feels that men are disappearing. The man feels that women have become inaccessible. But they don't see that these are two poles of the same trauma. The woman lived in submission for centuries and is now taking revenge with control.
The man suppressed feelings for centuries and is now taking revenge with detachment. One is afraid of dissolving, the other of depending. One protects boundaries, the other checks reliability. But in the end, both end up in emptiness. That is why there are so many men today who are outwardly successful, but inwardly depleted. They don't search because they don't see where their place is. They don't open up because they don't feel anyone can handle them. A woman wants an emotional partner, but is she ready to face his pain? Is she ready to see him not only as a resource, but also as vulnerability? Is she ready to be there not as a judge, but as a witness? Most are not, because the woman is also tired. She is tired of carrying responsibility for everyone, tired of being strong, tired of men who don't even know who they are. But instead of admitting this fatigue, she starts playing the role of the omnipotent, and this role makes her cold. The man comes for warmth but gets an analysis, comes for acceptance but gets a correction plan, comes for
silence but gets a flood of words. And at some point, he simply stops coming. Modern culture has turned relationships into a field of evaluation. A man must conform, otherwise he is unworthy. But behind this system of demands lies female pain. After all, the woman is afraid of falling into dependence again. And the stronger the fear, the stricter the control. In this sense, men are not victims, but a side effect of female insecurity. They pay the price of loneliness for the woman's fear of being vulnerable again. But we cannot blame women entirely. They simply do not know how else. They were taught that weakness is danger, that trust is naivete, that if you don't control, you will be betrayed. Therefore, they build relationships out of fear, not out of love. And fear does not know how to create intimacy. Fear only knows how to destroy. Men, in turn, do not understand that female coldness is not anger, but protection. That her control is not power, but an attempt not to feel pain. That her demands are not manipulation, but the cry of a soul that doesn't know how else to be safe. And until they learn to see this, they will be running away not from women, but from the pain that women unintentionally show them. Thus, the ancient script repeats itself. The woman seeks a man who will give her peace, but she herself cannot be at peace. The man seeks a woman who will accept his strength, but he himself does not know how to be strong without defense. They are both hungry for love, but do not know how to share it. They both seek warmth, but put on armor upon meeting. And this conflict makes loneliness the safest choice. But this war is not between the sexes. It is a war between fear and vulnerability. And as long as fear rules, love remains on the periphery. Men leave not because they stopped loving women, but because they are tired of fighting. And women demand not because they hate, but because they are afraid of losing control. This is a vicious circle. But there is another layer, invisible, deeper than social roles. It begins where the man first meets the woman, not as a mother, but as an equal. And it is there that mature love is born. But they still have to reach that point. Next, about the mechanisms hidden beneath this conflict, and how the collective unconscious turns love into a field of power. If these words resonate, subscribe to the channel. Let this truth reach those who are tired of playing the strong and correct roles, who feel that the loneliness of men is not weakness, but protection, who understand that behind male silence lies not indifference, but pain that no one is listening to. If you feel this is about you, subscribe to the channel. The algorithms will show this to those who have stopped believing in love, but still crave the truth. To those who do not want to hate, but do not know how to trust again. This is not about a battle of the sexes. It is about us having lost the ability to be human together. Subscription is not a sign of agreement, but a sign of awareness. Let these words find those who are ready to look deeper. Because next,
We will go to where loneliness ceases to be a personal story and becomes a collective trauma. To where Jung, Freud, and archetypes explain why women, without intending to, make men cold. To where love stops being safe but becomes authentic. When Jung wrote that a person lives life twice, the first time following external laws, the second listening to the inner voice, he was perhaps talking precisely about the man after 40, about the one who one day stops being a son, stops being a savior, stops being proof of someone else's significance. It is then that the clash with his own shadow begins. The male shadow is not aggression. It is the repressed energy that society calls improper. It is the desire for power that the man is afraid to show because he was shamed for it. It is the need for recognition that he hides under the guise of indifference. It is the pain from maternal control that he transfers onto women all his life. And until he meets this shadow, he is incapable of love, because his love will only be a continuation of childhood dependence. Freud said that the basis of any love is the first object, the mother. If the mother is too close, the child grows up with confused boundaries. He doesn't know how to distinguish care from control, love from attachment. A woman who over-coddles her son makes him emotionally castrated. She doesn't let him go because she is afraid of losing her purpose. She cultivates obedience in him, not strength. She makes him an ideal boy, but not a man. And then this boy looks for a mother in every woman, one who will accept but not demand. But an adult woman cannot be a mother. Her nature is different. She is not made to comfort. She is made to awaken. And when a man meets such a woman, he confuses awakening with a threat. She does not admire him endlessly. She demands honesty. She does not give peace. She provokes conflict in him. And instead of going through this internal fire, the man runs away. He cannot handle a woman who sees his shadow. The woman, in turn, cannot handle a man who does not reflect her expectations. She wants a mature man, but unconsciously seeks a son. She says she wants support, but instinctively chooses those she can control. And when a real man is nearby, one who does not need her control, she feels anxiety. His calm seems coldness, his silence, indifference. She does not understand that this is not indifference, but a strength she has never encountered. This is how the hidden dynamic is formed. The man seeks a woman who will accept his weakness. The woman seeks a man who will handle her strength. But when they meet, the struggle begins. He defends himself with silence, she with words. He closes off, she intrudes. And the more she demands, the deeper he withdraws. Both feel pain, but they don't understand that this is not a conflict between them, but a
clash of archetypes. Two main images live in the collective unconscious: the warrior man and the mother woman. In the modern world, both are distorted. The warrior man can no longer be a warrior because the world does not accept strength. He is called toxic, aggressive, dominant. The mother woman has lost her gentleness because she is tired of carrying responsibility. She has been turned into a controller. As a result, he is suppressed, she is burned out. There is no attraction between them, only tension. When a man suppresses the warrior in himself, he loses direction. His energy has no outlet, so it turns into apathy. He stops acting, stops achieving, stops feeling. His strength turns inward and destroys him. The woman, seeing this, starts to rescue. She takes control, decides, organizes, and manages. And the more she takes, the weaker he becomes. Because a man deprived of responsibility has nothing to be. But there is another figure, the hermit archetype. This is the man who leaves not out of weakness but out of necessity. He goes into loneliness to regain his purpose. This is not escape. It is the restoration of contact with himself. He is silent not because he has nothing to say,
but because he no longer wants to speak in vain. He is not looking for a woman because he wants to find himself first. This is the male way of healing: silence. The woman does not understand this. Her psyche is structured through contact. He needs a break, and when she tries to reach out, he closes off further. At the root of all this lies the man's ancient fear: to be consumed. The woman symbolizes the unconscious, the abyss, chaos. The man, order, structure, direction. And when he loses his footing, he is afraid of dissolving in her feelings. That is why many men cannot handle strong women. Not because they are weak, but because the core within them is not built. They cannot remain themselves in the presence of female depth. Therefore, they choose the superficial. It is safe with them. The woman is also afraid that a real man will shatter her control, that next to him she will have to be soft, that she will have to feel, not manage, and her psyche defends itself with coldness, irony, independence. But this is not strength, but armor, because deep down, every woman still wants to be seen, not dissected. When a man and woman meet out of fear, they do not build a connection, they make a deal. He promises to be safe, she promises to be grateful. He gives stability, she gives recognition. And as long as both play their roles, the relationship exists. But the moment someone decides to become themselves, the system collapses. Because there was never any truth in this construction. The path to true intimacy begins when the man stops being the son and the woman stops being the mother. When he reclaims his right to strength and she reclaims her trust in the masculine principle, then their attraction becomes not a war, but alchemy. Then the man
is not afraid of her feelings, and the woman is not afraid of his strength. Then love stops being dependence and becomes freedom. But until then, most remain in loneliness, because this transition requires destroying everything that was considered the norm, because one must give up the convenient image of oneself to be born anew. And not everyone is ready to die to become alive. That is why so many men remain lonely for years. They are not afraid of women. They are afraid of losing themselves in those who cannot handle their truth. But if a man goes through this internal crisis, if he allows himself to meet his own shadow, he stops being a reaction to the world. He becomes a source. And next to such a man, a woman can finally stop being a mother and become herself. But to reach that point, one must live through loneliness to the end, not as a punishment, but as a path. More on this later. When a man goes through loneliness and survives, he emerges from it different. Loneliness becomes not a prison, but a school. In this silence, he stops seeking approval, stops being a reaction to external expectations, stops playing roles that created the illusion of strength. He no longer wants to prove that he is worthy of love. He wants to be the one who is capable of handling it. The first thing he learns is not to justify himself. A man has lived his whole life under the gaze of a woman. First the mother, then the lover, then society. His value was always defined from the outside. When he stops justifying himself, dignity awakens in him. This is not pride, but an inner fortitude in which there is no need to explain. A man's true maturity begins where the need to prove himself disappears. Second, loneliness as strength. A man who is not afraid to be alone stops being controllable. He no longer seeks a woman to fill the void. He seeks a space where he can be himself. He stops clinging to relationships where he is not seen. Because loneliness stops being an absence. It becomes a state of freedom. He understands that it is better to be alone than to lose himself. Third, returning to the body. The man is accustomed to living in his head, analyzing, deciding, controlling. He was taught not to feel. But the body is the only place where the truth lives. When he returns to the body, contact with life comes, with breath, with pain, with rage, with pleasure. Through the body, he ceases to be a machine and becomes a being. Then he can desire again, not out of lack, but out of presence. Fourth, boundaries. A man who does not know his boundaries cannot be reliable. He either dissolves into the woman or destroys her with his control. A man's true strength is in the ability to say no without aggression and yes without fear. He learns not to save, not to prove, not to conform. He learns to stand. And when a woman meets such a man, she feels peace for the first time. Because next to him, she can be herself without losing herself. Fifth, learning to be silent differently. A man's silence used to be a defense. Now it becomes a choice. He is silent not because he has nothing to say, but because words should be born from the depth, not from fear. This silence does not destroy the connection, it creates space. A woman capable of handling this space gains strength next to him. Because true intimacy is born not from conversation, but from presence. Sixth, choosing a woman not out of need, but out of respect. When a man stops seeking salvation, he chooses not the one who will close his pain, but the one with whom he can be honest. He no longer needs an ideal, he seeks reality. He chooses a woman who is not afraid of his shadow, who is not scared of his strength, who does not want to correct him. She does not make him the center of the universe, but stands next to him as an equal. For the woman, the path begins with something different. Stopping the parenting. Stop making the man a student. Stop believing that love is the improvement of the partner. A woman who sees a child in a man cannot see a man. Her love becomes caretaking, her concern control. When a woman stops parenting, the man matures next to her. The woman must regain the ability to see, not with the eyes of the mind, but with the heart. To see a man who does not justify himself, does not explain, does not need. To see his silence not as a threat, but as strength. To see his directness not as rudeness, but as honesty. To see a person in him, not a tool. Only then, next to her, does the man not lose himself but grows. When the woman stops fearing the man's strength, she stops being a victim. When the man stops fearing the woman's depth, he stops being an executioner. Then a third state is born, union. Not dependence and not war, but cooperation, where there is no longer a need to save, prove, or control, where one can simply be. Both must pass through loneliness. The woman to stop controlling, the man to stop justifying himself. This is a path where two mature individuals meet, not two wounded children. Then relationships become not medicine for pain, but a space where one can breathe. A man who has stopped seeking approval becomes dangerous to the world of illusions. He cannot be bought with attention. He cannot be manipulated with guilt. He is calm, and this calm is stronger than any power. A woman who has stopped fearing loneliness becomes a magnet. She does not need to be conquered. She simply exists, and her presence awakens. When they meet, the games disappear. There is no struggle for control, no expectations. There is movement.
And in this movement, true intimacy is born, not as dependence, but as a dialogue of two free souls. The man who stopped justifying himself and the woman who stopped controlling create a new reality. In it, there is no one to blame. There is responsibility. In it, love stops being a transaction and becomes a meeting. And only then does loneliness disappear. Because loneliness is not the
absence of the other, but the absence of oneself. When you return to yourself, you stop being alone. When a man stops seeking a woman as salvation, and a woman stops seeing a threat in a man, a space of truth emerges between them. And then, love returns to its original meaning, not as a reward, but as a consequence of maturity. When a man stops asking, he starts choosing. When a woman stops demanding, she starts accepting. And in this exchange, the age-old war disappears. But before love returns, the pain must be lived through. To understand that loneliness is not a failure, but a preparation. That silence is not emptiness, but the place where strength is born. When a man realizes this, his loneliness ceases to be a burden. It becomes a pillar. And then he can go into the world not for confirmation, but with inner confidence. And the woman, seeing such a man, feels for the first time that next to him, she can stop being strong. When a man stops seeking approval, he becomes free, and only then is he capable of love. But the final part remains, not an end, but a return, to where love stops being a word and becomes a state. More on this later. When a man walks this path to the end, he returns, different, not better, not stronger, not enlightened, but authentic. There is no longer a drive for perfection in him, no internal race for recognition. He simply is. His silence is no longer a defense, but space. His calm is no longer indifference, but confidence. His loneliness is no longer pain, but home. He is not looking for a relationship. He is not chasing attention. He is not playing at strength. If love comes, he doesn't hide. But if it doesn't, he doesn't collapse. Because now he does not need a woman as proof of his own worth. His dignity has ceased to depend on the reflection in someone else's eyes. He understood that self-respect is not a reward, but an inner discipline. Now he does not choose based on the external. He is attracted not by beauty or intellect, but by a state. A woman in whom there is peace becomes a magnet for him. Not because she is ideal, but because she does not demand. She does not look for the meaning of life in him, does not want to save him, does not need him to be someone. She is present, and her presence restores the man's belief that intimacy is possible without the loss of freedom. Men who have been lonely for a long time know how to be present, not because they studied relationships, but because they learned to be with themselves. They know the value of silence. They are not afraid of pauses. They do not fill the space with words. They know how to listen. And the woman next to such a man feels for the first time that she is not being analyzed, evaluated, or remade. She is simply seen. But not every woman is ready for this. Most continue to live in the scenario of control. They want a strong man but cannot handle his independence. They want a gentleman but are scared of his depth. They need a man who fills, not one who mirrors. Because a mirror shows what one does not want to see. And until a woman meets her shadow, she will not be able to see the man. And here the paradox arises. Men remain lonely for years, not because women are bad, but because women are not ready for mature men. Those capable of depth seem boring to them. Those capable of honesty seem rude. Those who are not needy cause anxiety. The woman unconsciously seeks not an equal, but a reflection of her own incompleteness. Therefore, she chooses those who cannot hold her pain and suffers again. But are women to blame? No. They are part of the same system. They were taught to fear peace.
They were forced into the role of the savior. They were instilled with the belief that without drama, there is no love. And now, when the man stops acting, it seems to them that love has vanished. But this is not disappearance. It is purification. Love without pain seems boring to them because peace is unbearable for a traumatized psyche. Therefore, women, without realizing it, push men into loneliness. And men leave, not out of pride but out of self-preservation. They leave not from women but from the unconscious war, from a world where their strength is a threat and their silence is an irritant. They leave to where they don't have to justify what they feel, where they don't have to adjust their voice so as not to scare anyone, where they can simply breathe. This is not flight. This is a choice. A man who knows how to be alone becomes dangerous to the lie. He cannot be bought with appearance, manipulated with guilt, or intimidated with loneliness. He has been there already and knows that loneliness is not the enemy, but a mirror. He understood that love without internal freedom is a form of dependence. And now, if he chooses a woman, it is not out of fear, but out of abundance. The woman next to such a man must be whole, not ideal, not strong, not aware, just whole, capable of handling herself so she can handle the other, capable of being present without control, without expectations, without saving. And then a space of truth is born between them. In it, there are no winners and no losers. There are equals. Thus, blame disappears. Thus, the age-old drama of accusations ends, because in truth no one is to blame. Women were forced into the fear of submission, men into the fear of feelings. Both were instilled with the belief that strength and tenderness are incompatible. And now, as each returns to their nature, the world gradually heals. The man who has accepted his shadow no longer retaliates. The woman who has accepted her pain no longer controls. Instead of mutual accusations, respect appears, not the kind demonstrated in public, but quiet, like a breath. Respect for the journey the other has taken. And only then does loneliness cease to be a curse. It becomes a rite of passage. The man goes through it to be cleansed of everything false. The woman goes through it to stop,
fearing her own gentleness. And at the exit from this darkness they meet, not as halves, but as wholes. That is why men remain lonely for years, not because the world has become cold, but because their soul no longer agrees to the warm lie. They choose loneliness because they do not want to betray themselves. And when women stop seeing this as a threat, they will understand. The loneliness of men is not a refusal of love, but the path to it. If you recognize yourself in these words, write in the comments, "I no longer run from pain." Let's see how many are ready for the truth here. If you feel it's time to meet your shadow, write, "My darkness is my strength."